Sealand. Beginning of lesson here, we're sort of tying a bunch of little things, including what Vinny is going to talk a little bit about, maybe some songwriting ideas for me to try.
Yeah, okay, so, different approaches, because sometimes, when you take the same approach over and over again, it gets so stale that even when you're kind of halfway down the road, it feels like, to hell with it, it's not really happening, there's no inspiration or whatever. So it's always good to take a new approach. Pardon my coughing. Getting over the flu.
Vinny's getting over the dreaded California flu of 2013 here.
Yeah, God bless it.
He's one of thousands. So here we go.
All right, so in terms of different approaches and things you can do, take, for example, like the Police. Sting, there's a few songs I could tell that he wrote those songs on bass, So he had a bass line. And very often it's a very simple one because it's easier to sing complicated rhythms over a very simple whole note kind of bass line. An example of that would be he took this bass line, right? Now this is Fa, Sol, La, Ti, and he winds up, when he comes to the chorus, going to Do. I tried before to tell her about the rainy days since we first met.
Okay.
Big enough umbrella, but it's always me that ends up getting wet. So he builds that up, But let's not think in terms of analysis. This idea that, all right, he takes these four notes and goes, what can I do with this melodically? All right? And see, it's important to shift out of theory thinking when you're in the creative process. When you bump against, say, like, what am I going to do to change up over here? That's when you could use theory. It's like,
okay.
I got a fork in the road here. Which one should I take?
Okay.
Or how many forks can I make in this road, to give me a possibility of where to go. Okay? So that's one simple approach. I once wrote a song based on a bass line. And I sang a melody over that. Now, it was the reverse in this case, because this is a complicated bass line, so I simplified my melody, did long whole notes.
Okay.
I can't sing it, it's way high. It's like, don't see angels. I can't sing it and play it anymore together. But
you've mentioned before, because way back when, I asked you about bass players. We had a discussion about bass players. And even Charles Mingus, I think, came up in terms of how is it that bass players often are kind of the leaders of a band or the lead composers in a group, things like that. Charlie Hayden, I think, came up as well. You also mentioned that this was another thing that McCartney, I'm just riffing through several lessons, that McCartney had a gift for, was being able to play bass and sing at the same time.
Also, Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer had that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those folks at least started, playing bass, and I suppose continued, but they played other instruments maybe as well. But do you think they would get their sort of initial sense of a song from a bass line?
Not always. I mean, a lot of these, like McCartney, wrote Yesterday on an acoustic guitar. In fact, I don't think McCartney actually ever did that, like wrote a song based purely on a bass line.
Oh, okay.
Because he was more of an all-around musician.
Okay.
But licks, stuff like that, like Drive My Car lick, that might have been his inspiration, and then, those are just arpeggios of chords, so he probably went, oh, well, I could put that under it.
Okay.
So, part of it is the ability to think in layers. And it's a good experiment. Somebody once said that, like in, say, Baroque music, where you have four-part counterpoint, that's the limit of what the mind can handle processing all at once, and to be able to distinguish four different melodies at once. The mind is capable of doing that.
Okay.
Four.
That comes out of the classical world?
Yeah. How do you mean?
Comes out of the European classical tradition, or what?
What does? What comes
The
out
four-part, being able to discern 4 parts.
Well, it's just a brain function they're
Okay.
talking about. Like the brain is capable
Okay.
of that, All right. So there's one approach, from a bass line, right? What I used to do is I'd think of a cool turn of a phrase that I thought would be an awesome pop song title,
Okay.
Whatever the case may be,
From worst to bad.
yeah, yeah.
Whatever.
That last song was that was called "A Time for Miracles." I don't think I came up with the chorus first on that one.
This brings up something that's from slightly before we punched in here today. You talked about choruses are, for you, choruses are kind of the first thing that you'll work on or think of or may come up with.
Because choruses are easy. They're the repetitious melody. They're the catchy part, the hook of the song.
Okay.
And you get to repeat the lyrics, so you don't have to think lyrically that much.
Okay.
Rather than filling in, like if you're writing a verse and you don't have lyrics yet, you might go da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da until you get lyrics.
I was thinking of this listening to some stuff on XM with choruses that same line over and over, just in the last week, 2 weeks since we last met. So yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Again, I've said this to you before, but it bears repeating. And I found this true in my own life. Igor Stravinsky, the classical composer, at the time that he was composing, basically anything went. It was an anything goes period. They explored up to the furthest reaches of dissonance and atonality. So that's problematic because there's no more rules, music theory-wise, So Stravinsky, what he did was he set about creating a set of rules that he would follow for a particular piece.
Okay. But not just for everything for 5 years or anything like that. Just the one piece.
Just the one piece.
Yeah.
I remember one time I was a teenager and I was jamming with a friend of mine and we did a 12-bar blues and I accidentally made this set of rules. And the rules were, I would do a walking bass and it didn't matter what note I hit in the walking bass. It wasn't going to follow music theory rules except when the chord changed to the next chord, then I'd have to hit the root. Okay. So in other words, I went... It sounds all weird, we're having fun with this atonal jam, but basically every time like the G7 I would hit the root on the G7, but all the other walking notes after that could be anything.
Okay.
And that was a set of rules, and we had actually a ton of fun doing this jam because it sounded like complete nonsense, yet it made some sort of established blues sense.
Would something sort of fall into place after a while where...
It did for me. I mean, it
they
was
would
kind
have
of an exercise.
some repetitive...
Yeah. So that's an idea. That's a kind of idea about how to set a rule. I mean, that's kind of avant-garde there, but
sure.
you can do that. Another way to set a rule is to limit yourself to 4 chords.
Oh, okay.
And see. All right. One of the exercises I used to do, and I didn't realize I was doing exercises at the time. I was having fun. But me and my buddies were obsessed musically. We wanted to write the best songs ever. We wanted to be as great as the Beatles were, all this stuff. And we'd go to parties and bring our guitars. And we'd hear a snippet of conversation and immediately try to create a song out of that snippet of conversation. One that comes to mind, and this was actually... poor Charlie. This is going to go down in immortality, and he hated me for it. But... I was working at this place, this kind of volunteer place with some other high school students, and this guy Charlie Grimaldi worked with us. And I happened to have a guitar there. We were waiting for Charlie to get started. We had nothing to do until he got there. So finally Charlie shows up, and I picked up the guitar and I started singing, Charlie Grimaldi finally came to work. Charlie, and we all started singing this. God, he got so pissed off. But, the melody just came out.
Yeah.
But the thing, what we used to do, and this is when I'm talking about exercises, squeezing melodies out of your brain.
Okay.
Forcing melodies to happen by just pure force of will. Take a note, jump really high, and see where it goes after that from those 2 notes.
Okay.
Now what I just played was a 1-6-4-5.
Okay.
What we used to naively call the C A minor F G progression when I was a kid, but this is actually a 1-6-4-5 because C A minor F G is just one key.
Right.
But to take that, this is the 50s progression.
Right.
Now the problem with 50s progressions, if you listen to 50s music, they all tend to sound the same. There's not much inspiration to make them sound different than 50s music. The reason, and this actually was going to connect, we're not doing the Beatles today, but I thought we were, and I studied Octopus's Garden.
Okay.
That's a 1-6-4-5 progression.
Okay.
I'd like to be under the sea, an octopus's garden. Here's the chord family template. 1, 6, 4, 5. Now that's your 50s progression. But somehow they managed to tweak it enough where it just sounded like a good old Beatles song.
Okay.
So, and I'll tell you, this was an exercise we did as kids, was that we knew about the C A minor F G progression, and we knew that the Beatles had this remarkable ability to take that old, tired chord progression and create something fresh out of it.
Yeah.
All right, and now you can take that progression, C, A minor, F, G, or whatever key you want to be in, 1, 6, 4, 5, and try to do something with it that inspires something that doesn't sound like a tired old 50s song, but sounds like something fresh and new.
Yeah.
Now, what might motivate or propel the melody, I always say rhythm is a motivator. It's a how do I put it? It like propels. This is why jazz is such a powerful improvisational situation, is because of swing itself. When you're messing around and going, and you got that ba 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 ba, kind of bouncy little rhythm, it somehow impels, like creativity, it somehow pushes it. So the reason I say this is because, well, maybe you're not getting anything you could squeeze out of your brain that'll make it sound like something other than a tired old 50s song. So what's a different angle? Well, how about doing something with the rhythm, instead of going, which immediately already sounds like a 50s song,
right,
to do something like, all right. Now, because I brought up the 50s aspect of it, you're going to hear it no matter what,
Well, and especially since it was played right before it, yeah.
Right. So, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. All right, so now another thing is, okay, well, you tried a new rhythm, nothing really got you inspired enough to write a melody against this tired old 50s progression. So then do what McCartney did. Change the order of the chords. Instead of going C, A minor, F, G, go F, G, C, A minor and see what happens.
Okay.
Now, instead, and by the way, a common thing is in 1, 6, 4, 5 can also be 1, 6, 2, 5.
Okay.
All right, 2 is D minor, 4 is F. And the only difference between the two chords is one note. This is F, these three notes.
Right.
And this is D minor. You know, there's similarity.
Right.
So he took D minor in this case, and he went, close your eyes and I'll kiss you, tomorrow I'll miss you. All right, so he reversed the pattern.
Right.
Well, didn't reverse it, but started, up the the treadmill a little bit. So that's another approach. The idea is to create new neural pathways in your brain, like literally to walk down different roads in your brain to see another perspective. Sometimes actually, sometimes a song will write itself. That's a function of working hard as a songwriter, by the way. Lennon and McCartney both had these revelations. In McCartney's case, it was Yesterday. And in Lennon's case, it was, I forget what song it was, but he kind of woke up to the melody, from a dream or something like that. Yesterday came to McCartney in a dream. That is a function of, remember when I said about squeeze melodies out of your brain?
Yeah.
That's what these guys were doing. Because they're trying to always outdo themselves, even. Not just competing with each other, but with their own selves.
Sure.
How can I trump what I did here? McCartney spent the rest of his career trying to write another Yesterday, and he never quite succeeded.
Oh.
Yesterday was... But, you could look at examples like The Long and Winding Road was another attempt at him writing another Yesterday.
Yeah.
Here, There, and Everywhere, There are plenty of his ballads that you can tell he's taking the cue from Yesterday and trying to write something as good as that.
Yeah.
But what came out were unique variations,
Sure.
nonetheless,
Sure.
So, but, one exercise would be to take the 1-6-4-5 progression and try to create something new out of it, okay?
Okay.
Again, while you're driving, turn off the radio. If you got to, all right, I told you that I have a friend that used to work with Bob Dylan, and one of the things Dylan used to do, they would be walking around the city, I had a little notepad, and if a cool turn of a phrase came to his mind, he'd jot it down real quick. When he got home, he'd throw it into a basket. And he had a basket full of these cool little phrases, and every once in a while he'd pick one out, when he was writing a song, and, oh yeah, all right, cool, I'll throw this one in there. That's
Oh, okay.
Cool. So, take a turn of a phrase. So this is what I used to do in college, was I'd turn off the radio, and, I have to say, even through my jazz training and all this other stuff, and when I studied classical texts and all like this, I was still a pop songwriter. I never stopped admiring the art of the 3-minute pop song. It's a big challenge to write a piece of art in 3 minutes,
Yeah.
So in any case, I'd be driving to school, I'd have one of these turns of phrases that I'd like, and I would start singing melodies, all right? I would start singing melodies that would give me a nice hook, a nice melodic hook that, is memorable. And the acid test was I'd go through my day at college and drive back home, and if the melody came back to me, I knew I had a good hook.
Oh, okay. I forget, with all the little tape things and the flip videos and things like I need to get in the habit, I think, of carrying that along with me.
Yeah.
I go places mostly alone, so writing while I'm driving, you don't necessarily want to do that, but
I have like a handy little digital recorder.
I've got a couple of them.
And it's so cool because I would have late night inspirations and go, I'd get out of bed and go, okay, I have to write this, I have to get this down.
Yeah.
So I get it down on there, and I tell this very often, I'd go, just 3 minutes, just long enough to get it down, but then I'd find myself like an hour and a half later still kind of tweaking it.
Sure.
Which is a way of tricking yourself into being creative, by the way, is doing something like that,
Well, I just sort of thought the flip video that could be one of the best things for that kind of thing, because not only are you getting an audio record of the thing, but it's also placing it in a certain time. And I don't know if you're filming yourself or whatever when you're just sort of humming or going bop 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 or whatever. But putting it in the computer, you're not losing it. You haven't erased it or haven't lost your tape recorder or whatever.
Well, for an example of how great and handy that is, like this accrued a whole bunch of little MP3 concepts. So I dragged and dropped them onto my computer, and they sat there, and literally months went by, and one day, I'm looking at the files, and I'm like, oh, I had all these ideas. I wonder if there's anything in there.
Did you have something?
Oh yeah, there's a song that the Venice Roasters are going to do temporarily called "Herding Cats," but it's and so on and so forth. Cool. It's got a cool bridge, by the way, too.
Herding cats and finding Jesus.